All right, so let's see what's in the box today. It is from Engineered Endodontics. Engineered Endodontics. All right, let's open it up. Oh my goodness. Actical. DC sealer. One. Let's see, how many is in this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, yep, 3, 4, 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. I ordered way too much. I ordered way too much. Way too much. So they were on sale and I went crazy. On sale and I went crazy. Remember what I always tell you guys? You guys ask me, what is your sealer of choice, or what kind of sealer do you use? And I always tell you guys, sealer is not important. I mean, sealer is important, but not as important as the previous steps in endodontics. Irrigation and activation is the most important part of endodontics. Obturation is important, but not as important as irrigation and activation. Remember what we always say, it's more important what you take out than what you put in. All right? It's all important. If you want to put importance on everything, everything is important. It's just like a puzzle that you build, different pieces fit to give you the big picture, right? But irrigation and activation, 6% hypo. Irrigation with 6% hypo. Activation, sonic, ultrasonic activation. Those are important. Those are extremely important. Then you can obturate with whichever material you want. Usually we obturate with gutta percha anyway, so gutta percha is universal, right? Then it comes to sealer, because we have so many different varieties and kinds of sealers. And I always say, they say, what sealer do you use? I say, or what sealer do you recommend that we buy? I say, the sealer that's on sale. Buy that. And I really mean that. Sealer, not much importance on sealer, because modern day sealers, they all have pretty much the same properties. All right. So don't emphasize so much on sealer. Don't emphasize so much on obturation. I know why. That's why we call it the thrill of the fill, right? Because we like to see those pretty white lines on our PAs and show off our obturation, because that's the only way people can tell whether we did a good root canal or not. But you could have done a terrible root canal. No rubber dam, no irrigation and activation of 6% hypo. You could have none of that stuff. Meaning you could have not adhered to the fundamentals of endodontics, rubber dam, and as I said, irrigation and activation with copious amounts of 6% hypo. You could have instrumented in blood and saliva because you didn't use a rubber dam. You didn't have good isolation, and then your obturation looks fantastic on the x-ray, on the PA, but that root canal will fail, right? So those pretty white lines are meaningless. So what I'm trying to say is that don't focus so much on those pretty white lines on the x-ray. They really mean nothing. I've shown you hundreds and hundreds of cases that they were obturated short, canals were obturated short, canals were obturated long, canals were missed. 30 years later, the tooth is still there. Patient has no symptoms or no periapical relucencies associated with the tooth. All is well. So those pretty white lines are meaningless. So stop focusing so much on obturation and ignoring what was before that procedure, the obturation procedure. The rubber dam, the proper glide path, straight line access, good access, not those ninja, whatever, extremely conservative endo accesses. Those are just for clickbait on Instagram. Irrigation and activation of 6% hypo. Those steps are extremely important. Rubber dam, I cannot emphasize how important rubber dam is for endodontics. So focus more on that. And then, as I said, obturation is great. You must have good obturation as well. But you guys emphasize so much on obturations, so much more on obturation than the previous steps. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's why I bought all of these, because they were on sale. So for me, to me, sealer is meaningless. I buy the sealer that's on sale. Now, this sealer, the BC sealer was on sale, so I'm going to use the BC sealer. When I'm done with this batch, this huge pile of sealers, BC sealers, then when I want to buy, when I need to buy more sealers, then I'll look and see which sealer is on sale again, and I will buy that sealer. So I have no problem switching sealers. Because as I said, sealer is, modern day sealers, they all have pretty much the same properties. All right. These are, by the way, much harder to retreat. These BC sealers, bioceramic sealers, are much harder to retreat if you ever have to retreat them. So, and that's why it's so important for these types of sealers, these bioceramic sealers, to have a gutta-percha core. You cannot fill the entire canal with just the BC sealer, because if we ever need to retreat that tooth endodontically, it's going to be extremely difficult to remove the BC sealer if there is no gutta-percha core in the canal. If there's a gutta-percha core, we remove the gutta-percha core, then we can try to remove the BC sealer from the canal walls, right? But if there is no gutta-percha core, or if there is gutta-percha core, but let's say it's short a few millimeters, so you filled the last few millimeters of the canal with the BC sealer, it's going to be extremely difficult to regain patency in such cases. So BC sealer is good, but you need to know how to use it properly, or it's not going to compensate for your lousy root canal. Don't think that the BC sealer will compensate for your lousy root canals. All right, so remember, pretty white lines on the PA are meaningless if you didn't adhere to the fundamentals of endodontics and the steps that came before it. All right, so focus on that. All right, but I'm excited to go ahead and I used to use AH Plus, and now I'm done with AH Plus, and I'm gonna switch to the BC sealer. And as I said, when I'm done with all of these 40 of them BC sealer, then I'll look on the catalog and see which sealer is on sale, and I'll buy that. All right, as I said, modern day sealers, they pretty much have the same properties. BC sealer, as I said, be really, really, really careful with it, because as I said, it will not compensate for the lousy root canal, and retreatment is going to be extremely challenging if there is no gutta-percha core through and through all the way to the working lengths. So be really, really careful with these types of sealers, BC sealers. And this is what is in these cases, these packs. So Actical BC sealer.